Week. Dr. Rishi Deer is a junior doctor. Peter Hitchens is a columnist for the Mail on Sunday. Lem Sisse is a poet and broadcaster. And Angela Epstein is a journalist and commentator. Welcome to you all. The Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, says that planned strikes by junior doctors from September the 12th could lead to 100,000 operations being cancelled. The doctors are resisting the imposition of a new contract and say that they've been boxed into a corner by the government. Well, with both sides locking horns, it's become the worst industrial relations dispute in the history of the NHS. The Hippocratic Oath states, first, do no harm. Will this latest move end up doing more harm than good? Well, Tommy's been finding out if people in London think if this strike will cure the contract dispute.
I'm here in Tavistock Square in London, outside the headquarters of the British Medical Association. Now, we know that they are on the side of the doctors, but how does the public feel about doctors going on strike?
Obviously, if I was ill, I'd be disappointed. However, I do feel like doctors should be better paid, so what's the solution?
I just think there are some professions where I don't think striking should be allowed. And you're talking about people's health here.
You can't stop doctors from using their right to be able to strike.
I think it's highly detrimental to the welfare of a lot of people, especially given the length of hospital waiting lists and the strains on the NHS at the moment.
If you're talking about morality, the morality is people should be allowed to strike.
How does it make you feel when you hear that they are striking?
It makes me angry.
There's a moral obligation. You've got to look after patients.
Absolutely, that's why I became a doctor, because my family are all doctors. We would never, ever, ever strike if it compromised patient safety.
Doctors are about to go on a 5-day strike. Should that be allowed?
No, really, no. What about the patient and who will serve them? So it's not good.
People are going to be let down.
In the short term, yes, but in the long term, tired doctors make mistakes.
I think 24-hour strike would make the point amply. I think 5 days is actually bordering on dangerous.
I think that it's a really sad time for doctors. It's not something that they want to be doing. It's not something that patients want to see their doctors doing. And actually, I think it should make us all sit up and think about what we think the future of the NHS is going to be.
That was the diagnosis of the people Tommy met. Let's see if our guests can concur. Right, Rishi, let me begin with you. We know the police are not allowed to strike. Why should doctors be allowed to strike?
Well, Naga, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. I think it's important to get our views across. First of all, why has it come to this? For me, the day to strike is a very sad day. It's a sad day for doctors, it's a sad day for patients, it's a sad day for the public as well. It represents a failure of talks, a failure of the government to listen. This has been there since the contract was imposed on July the 7th. The announcement there was that if we couldn't reach a resolution on some very important points, that we would go forward to industrial action. What concerns me, it's not the question of should you strike, it's what are the ramifications if this contract goes through. You talk about the short term, obviously the strike is going to inconvenience a great deal of people. There will be consultant cover throughout the days of strike. The Health Education England is able to contact the BMA, so if any sort of incident is declared, doctors will come back from the picket lines. But the fact is, this contract, not only the doctors themselves, but the government's own risk register has shown is completely unsafe, it's completely unstaffed, it's completely unfunded, and it's politically motivated. And that's why we have to oppose it.
We are talking about whether it's ethical for doctors to strike at this moment. And is there not an alternative to striking? So, considering the responsibility you have to keep us safe? Absolutely, and I take on board that completely. And when you say about the Hippocratic Oath, the aim is to do no harm, the sort of amendment to the Hippocratic Oath back in 1997 actually said that it's the responsibility of doctors to stand up against laws which are going to compromise the health of their patients. You talk about the ethical dilemma. This contract has been shown that at the moment, just to give the viewers a quick explanation, at the moment we've got 7 days of emergency care. So if you come in any time of the night, weekends, whatever, you get seen by a doctor with anything like a heart attack, an injury, etc. What they're talking about is stretching 5 days of non-emergency care. I am going to interrupt because I don't. Well, no, but I think, Nadia, if you're talking to me just about, I'm trying to tell you about the ethical dilemma. By stretching those things to 7 without funding is going to lead to patient harm. It will lead to patient deaths. So that's why I'm talking about ethically. Do no harm. I would be, and I just have to say one thing, I would be actively complicit in endorsing a contract which not only I know does harm, as a doctor of 10 years' experience in the NHS, but also that the government's own risk register has shown does harm. So that's why. Angela, your son is training to be a doctor.
Yes.
hearing what Dr. Adair has said here, or what Rishi's said here, do you agree?
Well, first of all, I'd like to set aside the fact that my son is a medical student because he's not here to forward his view, and I think it's unfair to sort of be a spokesperson for him or to let what happens in one's own family influence one's point of view with the greatest respect to the question. I just think, as a whole, junior doctors should hang their heads in shame. It is morally repugnant to strike. Patients cannot timetable when they are going to be ill. They cannot legislate, and I know myself because I've experienced that patchy weekend care many years ago when I had a threatened miscarriage and I had to wait till Monday to find out whether the baby was still viable or not because there just wasn't the scanning unit in place. So I know all about, from a personal point of view, and I'm sure lots of people have as well. We cannot have this chaotic bullying, emotional blackmailing. You're quite right, the police aren't allowed to strike because if you have a public service upon which people's lives depend, then you cannot withdraw labour just because you think that you're not earning enough. Doctors, by and large, and it is a noble profession, have the greatest respect, and you deserve the salaries that you get because of the hard training that's involved in acquiring that. But you will have secure pensions, you will have a decent salary at the end of your training. A lot of people work 7 days a week. We have a 7-day-a-week.
OK, Rish, give Rish the
Could I just come back to Angela?
Yes.
So, first of all, a couple of points that you've made there. So you said, if I get ill, patients cannot control when they get ill. So what you're referring there to is an emergency, which runs 7 days a week.
Managing the
Secondly, you've said that this is an issue just about pay. I've got a year to go before I become a consultant. The junior doctor's contract dispute in terms of pay does not affect me directly. If anything, striking, I would actually lose out on pay. I have to say I agree with you in one sense, Angela, because I read a very interesting article of yours last year on the 30th of November 2015. You wrote in the Telegraph that why should patients wait to see doctors? And you spoke about your experience with your sons in fracture clinic when you were having to wait for long periods of time. And it was interesting that your closing statement mentioned that how can the government push through a 7-day service? Is that really the priority, and that we should be looking to strengthen the 5-day non-emergency service? And I absolutely agree with you. I have worked in a fracture clinic at my last hospital.
They're not mutually exclusive.
I have worked in a fracture clinic in my last hospital where 3 doctors covered 130 fracture clinic patients in 3 hours. I spent 3 minutes per patient. That is not good care. That is not safe care. We got lucky at times. And all you're doing is, if you're not going to increase the funding and the number of auxiliary staff to run a 7-day non-emergency service, you need diagnosticians, you need nurses.
Okay. I want this to be a conversation with
This is not about striking and whether it's right or not. And I should add here that the junior doctors' leaders recommended the deal which they're now striking against back in May. And they said that it was acceptable. So it's odd that they should now be calling strikes against it. And it's also quite well known that there is strong division among the junior doctors' leaders and indeed among doctors as a whole about whether these strikes should go ahead. So the argument here is not about the things that you say. We all know there are many problems with the health service. The argument is about whether it is moral for you to go on strike. And what you do in your job is you provide mercy. And is there ever any stage where you can say to somebody, I'm not going to provide mercy to you, even though you're in pain and injured, because I want more money? And the answer has to be, quite plainly, no. And you keep saying how sorry you are about how you're going on strike. Well, if you're that sorry, why do you support the strike?
Let's get Lem to have a say as well.
I've heard of doctor strikes in the past, and I've not heard of lots of people dying because the doctors have been on strike, and I've not heard of lots of people not getting the service that they needed because of a doctor strike. There is no great news story of
Let me give you a small individual example. I was for many years
I've spent
an industrial...
my life trusting doctors.
Can I just tell you this thing? Let's tell you this thing. I was for many years an industrial correspondent. I covered strikes all the time. And I remember there was a strike by ambulance drivers, and I was assured by my friends who were trade union leaders in the ambulance dispute that there would be no risk to actual emergency cover. The day the strike began, I witnessed someone being struck by a car in the Finchley Road in North London.
Yes.
I called an ambulance on 999. Yes. The 999 operator said to me, there will be no ambulance because of the strike. The patient will have to wait for at least an hour lying in the road in pain. I saw this happen. This kind of strike is dangerous, does cause misery.
Dr. Raj Prasad did an article in the Huffington Post where a science journal proved that when doctors go on strike, more people, less people die. And you can research that. It's the Huffington Post.
Do you know, I want to bring in another junior doctor. We've got Jacqueline Hayworth, who is in our Manchester studio. And Peter, you mentioned that there is division among junior doctors, and it'd be quite interesting, Jacqueline, to get your view on whether or not you're going to strike and you support the strike.
Well, As Rishi's described, many junior doctors, they feel that strike action is the last resort. And many doctors feel that to go on strike is really our last option against this bullying that's going on by our employer. Now, nobody can deny junior doctors, they have been creative in their pursuit of a fair contract. We've staked out the Department of Health, we've had the I'm in Work Jeremy campaign, we've marched, we've rallied, we've had sit-in protests, and none of it's worked. We're still getting this contract, which is going to be a significant pay cut for a number of junior doctors. So for junior doctors like me, who are mothers, who have gone on maternity leave, who are part-time and who are working in intensive and highly antisocial hours specialities like anaesthetics, we are going to be having significant pay cuts. So going forward, a doctor who makes the same choices as me, who's a mother like Angela, will have to work for 2 years for free.
You spoke about, you know, several protests, sit-ins. Are you going to go on strike now, the next set of strikes?
Well, I will need to defer my decision until September the 12th, really, because I do have concerns. We all have concerns. It was mentioned before that the BMA recommended the deal, and I think the BMA owe junior doctors and owe the general public an explanation about this, because our leader of the JDC, Johan Malawana, he went round the country, he held a series of roadshows which were written and approved by NHS employers to say how great the contract was, and it was delivered to their timescale. It was all dictated by them, and we had no choice. All the information came one-sided, and we still rejected the deal. 58% of us rejected the deal.
OK, Rishi.
So, yeah, just going on what Jacqueline said, it was a referendum, so there was no position of the actual BMA itself to say we recommend the contract. It was a person within the BMA, but that was put to a referendum, and I give the analogy of Brexit. So our current Prime Minister and the previous Prime Minister both recommended to stay in the EU, but they've respected the will of the people, the will of their voting public, to carry that through. So the BMA represents us as their membership. But I just want to go back to what Peter said just 1 second, because you kept mentioning about, you know, you're doing this to earn more money, you're doing this to earn more money.
Well, it is about money. Let's not pretend. Let's not pretend.
No, listen to me. I believe money is certainly an issue within the context of recruitment and retention. But what I'm saying to you is, so we're at a position where there is 20% gaps on rotas. That's been shown this week in robust data around the country. We're in a position where there's 20% less applications to medical school. We are struggling. I used to do the SHO rota at a major trauma hospital. Let me just tell you this 1 second. Last
you just want to change the subject.
It's
all
not
the time you change the subject.
I'm just really surprised. I'm just really surprised that two columnists are not trusting the same doctor that they would take their children to if they were ill. This strike is happening by people that we entrust our children and our lives to. And when they stand up and say, look, there really is something wrong, our instinct is to say you just want money, and I don't believe that's true.
Angela.
OK, I think also what concerns me about this whole debate, and I appreciate we're trying to focus in on the issue of whether striking is ethical. That's the nub of the issue. There are lots of different ways when you can sit around the table and negotiate. But the issue here is the withdrawal of Labour, where the members of the public are a captive audience, is that morally acceptable? And on any level, I don't see how it can be. And what really concerns me and troubles me, and Peter's right with this, I'm sorry, mea culpa, sort of the hair shirt aspect of this, is that there's always an anecdotalising way of approaching this. And just if I could just finish, you know, mothers working antisocial hours, juggling, it's difficult. I mean, lots of people do jobs where their domestic circumstances don't necessarily marry with their professional lives.
Jacqueline.
And it's about a choice that you make. If you choose to go into medicine, this is a choice that you make.
Angela,
it's not
time
an
is
easy
of the
job.
essence. Jacqueline, we're talking about whether it's ethical to strike. Do you think it's ethical?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to pick up on a word that Angela used, which was whether it was moral, actually. And as I've mentioned before, NHS employers, they're our only employer. If we want to work as junior doctors in the UK, we don't have the option like consultants do to work in the private sector. We must work for the NHS. There's nowhere else for us to go. We have no choice.
But you will do at some point. When you become a consultant, you will
So I've been a junior doctor for 9 years. I have another 9 years left. So yes, I will have a choice in 9 years' time. But I have a young family who I need to pay for now. I need to pay a mortgage now, you know. And this junior doctor contract is about money.
I want to move away, Jacqueline.
Can I just finish what I'm saying?
I do want to get to the idea
about saving money for the government, our mothers, part-time workers, those doctors who are already working evenings, weekends, nights. They're working the hardest. These are the doctors who are going to lose the most money from these contracts. And the government know this.
OK, we are asking if it's ethical for doctors to strike. And you've been sending us your texts and tweets. Our audience has. Let's get the views on this subject, whether it's ethical to strike.
Naga, as with the studio, as with the people out in the street when I was interviewing them, and the text now, people are split. People want to support the doctors, but they're worried about patient safety. Terry saying, I still support the junior doctors, even though my double operation is scheduled right in the middle of one of their strikes in October. Stephen saying they are using the same rights as most other unionised workers. When being bullied or cornered into something they don't agree with, withdraw your labour. This is a democracy, so it's their right to do that. Rose says, I am losing my patience with them, with the doctors. From what I've heard, they are losing the support of some of the public now as well. Mick says, a worker is a worker. It doesn't matter what they're being paid to do. If their employer is abusing the relationship, then they strike. And finally, Pat says, it certainly is ethical for them to strike when they accepted... it certainly is unethical for them to strike when they accepted a good deal not that long ago.
Lots of views there. Lem, is it your view here? Is it emotionally? Are we going to see doctors losing the support of the public? That's the tone of some of these comments.
The public is being pushed into a corner and being told facts like the doctors are using the public and that they will not get the service that they need if the strike happens, and that's just not true. People are not dying because this strike happens. Those doctors care for their people, for the people that they look after, and they're not going to jeopardise lives by this strike. They're making a point, and when a doctor stands up and makes a point about how he feels about his work or her work, I'm going to listen. Because he's the person who looks after the life in our community. Do you listen to the doctors that object to the strike? Like, do you listen to the doctors that object to the strike? Because there was a poll that came out this weekend that suggested there are a large number of junior doctors who don't feel comfortable with the strike. Case. I'm sure it was voted.
But you're arguing against yourself.
So we've already had a mandate, basically, and 98% of people voted.
But that mandate dates from November last year, and it's completely out of date because since then a deal has been negotiated which doctors were urged to accept and which was said at the time to be the best.
Exactly, and I just because
that mandate is completely out of date and should not morally.
I was making a point before, and I didn't get a chance to make it, but. You were saying, Angela, you accused us of being morally reprehensible. You said about diversifying the issue, and, you asked about, is it morally right, is it ethical to strike? That is the crux of the argument today. Well, I think that has to be taken into the context of why we're striking, what will come through. I feel that I'm almost in an unfair advantage on this panel because I've worked in the NHS for 10 years, so I know what cuts are like. Exactly, and you're patient, so I'm trying to...
I would say that we have an even greater stake in this.
Well, I'm a patient too. I'm a patient too, and we all use NHS, and so I feel that I'm in a position to talk to you about what's happened when rota gaps have been cut, when services have been cut. I mean, we've seen maternity services, we've seen A&E services being closed.
It's a different argument. You're changing.
It's not a different argument because in
Can I just put a question to you, a very simple question here. Are you the same? If a steel worker goes on strike, then the steel is not made. And that's all that happens. When the strike ends, the steel is made. When you go on strike and people are in pain, they are in pain for longer and with less hope of being cured and treated than if you were not on strike, and that is irrecoverable. That will happen. Do you really think there is no moral difference? It's self-evident. Do you really think there is no moral difference between a steel worker going on strike and a doctor going on strike?
So Peter,
do you really think that?
Thanks very much for making that point. What I'm trying to say to you is...
but what's the answer to the question? That's the nub of the issue. That's the nub of the issue. Is there an equitable morality?
Look, we've had the question. Give Rishi the chance to answer it. Briefly, please.
Yeah, briefly. So... We've got a contract which is being imposed in 4 weeks. There is an alternative.
There is a question here. Is it morally ethical for doctors to write? Do you feel you are morally correct to strike when you risk putting patients in pain? That's the question.
If the alternative is to risk causing patient death, which is what it will be if this contract comes.
Thank you.
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all of your comments. And I must say, we've had an unprecedented amount of interaction from you, our viewers, this morning. Thank you very much.